I'm Taylor. I am a developer advocate, and this is Web3 from someone who doesn't want your Bitcoins. So before we get started, we need to lay some groundwork to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. So you might not recognize who this guy is, but he's arguably one of the most important people of the 20th century. This is Tim Berners-Lee, aka inventor of the World Wide Web, aka the www in front of any URL that you visit today. And Tim had a lot of great ideas about tech, technology, and the internet and what we can do with it. And it is because of the work that Tim did that we're even able to communicate right now. So the internet has changed a lot in the past 25 years, and a lot of that change has been enabled through advances in technology such as HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and much more. And that has allowed us to advance from simple static pages that just serve information and images to dynamic experiences that change depending on who's interacting with them. While all of this was going on, Tim and his friends were not idly sitting back watching this happen. They began to try to categorize these different eras of the internet, and they eventually coined these terms Web 1, Web 2, and eventually Web 3. So Web 1 would be described as the read-only era or the hypertext web. This era was really defined as a period in which the internet was pretty much used only to find information. So websites like Wikipedia and personal blogs really began to take off during this time period. Websites didn't really look or function how you and I are used to them functioning today. In fact, most of the communication was unidirectional, meaning the server just sent information to people. And this was great because people were working really hard to find information. In fact, they were searching all over the web because there wasn't a great centralized way for them to find things, which at the time was okay because decentralization was a core tenet of Web 1, right? Anybody could contribute to the web, but few people actually could or even really knew how to do it, which gave rise to Web 2. So Web 2 can be considered the read/write era or the social web. And Web 2 would be defined as having interactivity or the ability to communicate with the server, but also for the server to communicate with you as well. And in the quest to make things easier for people to be able to find other websites, find each other, or find goods online, platforms like Google, Facebook, and Amazon emerged. And these platforms allowed people to have access to them for free. And so people then had all these new features, these new communication tools, and all this information. But people started doing something really interesting with all of this. Instead of just passively viewing the information, users began to create their own information. And we can see this happening every single day. We see this with the videos that people make, the photographs that people take, and the tweets that people write. And all of these are forms of user-generated content. And we see this every day. However, this shift in how we interact with the content led to a shift in the underlying product of what was being offered. And Web 1, the product was the information that was being served, the facts that were being given. And Web 2 no longer was the information, no longer was the product, the information. The product was now the very people who were using the information. And to be honest, this would actually anger a lot of people. And this is what would spark the rise of Web 3. But I want to stop and point out something very interesting here. Oftentimes we see Web 3 and Web 3.0 categorized as the same thing. But the thing is, they're not. Web 3.0 is perhaps a bit drier and filled with technical jargon, but it represents a schism or a break that could happen in technology and honestly might be worth pursuing. So let's take a journey and talk back about Web 3.0. Back to our friend Tim. So he defined Web 1 and Web 2 well after the fact, meaning that these eras were already underway or over by the time he and others looked back and started to classify them. But that was not the case for Web 3.0. Instead, Web 3.0 was a bold proclamation from Tim and his friends at the time, and they believed that the future of the internet laid in the hands of digital agents or machines. And Tim and his friends called this version of the internet the semantic web, semantics stemming from the study of meaning. And they believed that we as humans could create a framework that would allow data to be shared and reused anywhere, independent of source or system. But more importantly, they believe that that data could then be handed to these smart agents, and that these smart agents can make informed decisions based on the data that you gave them. And if we stop and think about that statement for a moment, you might say to yourself, well, don't we have Siri and Alexa and Cortana? Don't they kind of already do that? They make informed decisions based on the information that we give them. And the answer is a little bit murky. It's not too straightforward. I like to consider myself a part-time armchair scientist. So I figure we should try this out. So I actually invite you to grab your smartphone, smart device, smartwatch, whatever you have, as long as it's smart, and ask it to make you a doctor's appointment. And I'm going to do it right now with you. So let's see what Siri has to say. So, hey Siri, can you make me a doctor's appointment?
What date and time is this appointment?
So you probably can't hear what she said, but she asked me what date and time is this appointment, which is not quite right. She missed the semantic meaning behind what I was asking her. And because I am a good part-time armchair scientist, I have followed through and given her a time and a date before. And I know that she'll actually just make an appointment on your calendar that says doctor's appointment at the date and the time that she gave you. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted her to call my doctor and make me an appointment. She didn't though. She didn't call the doctor. She never asked what was wrong. And she didn't even ask if I had insurance, which if you live in the United States, that's actually a really important question. So all jokes aside, we do have these really amazing AI devices that mimic being capable of processing information, but they have nowhere near the processing power or semantic understanding of a human being. So where does that leave us? This dream of intelligent agents helping us with mundane tasks has not come to fruition. And they first thought of this back in 2004. It's been almost 16 years. And depending on what country you're in, this idea is almost old enough to drink. But let's backtrack a moment, because this was Web 3.0, the semantic web, the intelligent web, or the web defined by Tim Berners-Lee. I would argue that most of you have a completely different definition of Web3, or you had no idea what Web3 was until this talk today, which is totally fine, because now we're going to talk about the mainstream definition and ideas around Web3. Decentralization. There's a reason that is the only word on the screen, because it is the only word that you hear about when people talk about Web3. And sure, if you dig a little bit deeper and want to talk about you'll hear people talk about blockchains, NFTs, cryptocurrencies, DAOs, a bunch of other jargony words. But at its core, Web3 is about decentralization, right? Is it? This is really fascinating, because if you were paying attention, decentralization was actually a core facet of Web 1. And if you remember, they kind of moved away from that and changed it because a lot of people couldn't contribute to it. A lot of people couldn't use it because it was hard. I think it's kind of funny how some of these same issues have come back up again years later. But on a more serious note, Web3 is more than just decentralization. And I feel like we should now talk about someone who truly understands this new Web3. So if we spoke about the unofficial archivist of Web 1 and Web 2, I believe it's only fair that we talk about the unofficial archivist of Web 3. Gavin Wood, the co-founder of Ethereum and the creator of the Polkadot chain. Both of these are blockchains, if you are not familiar. So back in 2014, Gavin had some really strong words for the current internet giants. And he had an idea of a new future of the internet, something that he called Web 3. So you see, Gavin believed that centralization was a bad idea. He was not a fan of putting all your eggs in one basket, because then he would ask you, what happens when the bottom of the basket falls out? What happens to your eggs? Gavin's other argument was that the current internet giants are really absolved from punishment. Facebook, Twitter, Google could remove your account. They could sell your data and completely ban you from their platform. And there's nothing really that you as a user can do about it. But I asked you, or I challenge you, are those actually real issues? Depending on who you ask, some would say yes, and some would say no. But my next question is, Are these strong enough or compelling enough reasons to build an entire ecosystem around preventing them? To be honest, I'm not really sure. The ideas behind Web3 are simple. It is a peer-to-peer system that lets you do whatever you want with no servers or no central authority to rule. People are simultaneously be creators and be consumers of the web. And many seek to replicate the same services that we have in the Web 2 space, but in a decentralized way in Web 3. I and many other technologists question if this is the right use for Web 3 technologies. Often technology mirrors what we see in real life. If we simply replicate the systems that we have now, we will bring with us the same faults and issues that the current systems have. Make no mistake, the internet is a fascinating tool, but it is in no way equitable and accessible for everyone. An important distinction to make is that Web3 is not blockchain technologies, and it's not blockchain masquerading as a new name. Web3 is an idea, it is a term, and we use that term to define how we interact with the internet. The same way that Web 1 and Web 2 are terms to define what we did during that time period. If you take nothing away from this presentation, please walk away with that. You must remember that the web was decentralized before we got where we are today. So all of these technologies that I have up here on the screen represent interesting avenues and use cases for Web3. And sure, we've heard of blockchain, and most of us have heard of cryptocurrencies, but did you know that games are being developed using decentralized principles, or that people are creating a decentralized Wi-Fi network that anyone could connect to? Web3 is far bigger than what mainstream media gives coverage to. And speaking of the things that mainstream media gives coverage to, let's talk about some of the issues with Web3. So due to time constraints, I cannot talk about all of these in depth, and they are in no specific order, but recognize that all of these are very real issues. So I'm just going to tackle the first two because they're the first two. So first up, we have people. And the biggest argument that you hear about this is that with no central authority, people are going to continue to do the same things or worse things that they've already been doing. But my argument to that is we have scammers and harassments and bad actors now using Web 2 technologies on platforms. We've had scammers, harassment, and bad actors, honestly, before we had the internet. So Web 3 isn't really going to solve that because that's not really a problem of the internet. That's really a problem with people. The second one I want to talk about is development and scalability. And this is a real issue. I don't have a great answer for this, right? Because blockchain overall, compared to what we currently have, is not fast. We do not know if NFTs will actually be useful in 5 years. The different consensus mechanisms that we use take time. And current blockchains cannot handle as many transactions as the Visa network. All of these things are true. But my counter argument to that is if we stop innovation because things suck, we will never get anywhere. I don't know about you guys, but I was alive when we saved files on a floppy disk, right? The thing that you stick inside of the computer. Yeah. And now we can transfer files seamlessly across the cloud. And just think, what if we had stopped at floppy disk because the whole process sucked? Well, we probably wouldn't be having this awesome conversation right now if we did. So I'm getting close to time. So I want to preemptively answer 2 questions. The first being, why do we need Web3? And I'm sure that you expect me as someone who works in the Web3 space to sell you on it and tell you that it is the greatest thing since white sliced bread. I'm not going to do that. The reason being is I don't know if we need this version of Web3. What I know is that our current systems are failing a lot of people, both socially and financially. And I think it's time we started asking ourselves, is there a better way? And can we do things differently? It is too early to classify what Web3 truly is. And it is only through looking back, once this is all over, can we draw a clear picture of what happened and actually understand what we built. The last question I want to answer early is, can Web3 and Web 3.0 merge? And you know what, Taylor, thank you for asking this question. This is such a great question. So these 2 concepts fundamentally set out to solve 2 different problems. Web 3.0 was focused on data, how machines interpret data, and how human beings structure data. Web3 is far more interested in how we interact with one another, how we trust one another, and how we do business with one another. And while much of the hype around Web3 has died out, I would hesitate to say that this technology is gone forever. I don't know about you, but I hate making doctor's appointments. And if Siri could one day do that for me, I would be so grateful. If history has taught me anything, it is that great ideas have a way of coming around again and again. And here it is. One last thing before I'm done, and I open it up to you guys, my final call to action. Well, my only call to action. If we want to see a world in which intelligent agents make our everyday lives simpler, or we want to see groundbreaking changes in how we define ourselves in digital spaces, how we trust each other online, and how we do business, we need everyone to be a part of the development of that technology. For Web3 to be equitable and accessible to everyone, everyone has to be there when we build it. We need more women helping define what Web3 can truly be. Thank you. And here's my contact info.
Thank you so much, Taylor. It was a truly amazing talk. And we have all the really nice comments. And someone is saying that they would love to see this lightning talk built into a series. And if you have so, then let us know.
Oh, wow. That is awesome. Yeah, there's so much to talk about in terms of Web3, and there's a lot of misinformation, but who knows? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I could be convinced to have a podcast episode or two.
Yeah, definitely. We would love to hear more about it. Yeah, I think we don't have any questions as such. We have few more minutes left, so if anyone would like to ask any questions, Taylor, so feel free to drop it in the chat. And
Yeah, for sure. You guys can ask me any questions. I know I didn't explain a lot of things too in-depthly because I was trying to squeeze it all in 15 minutes. So no question is too dumb. You can totally ask me whatever you want to. Or you can just message me on Twitter or whatever. Whatever.
So we have a question. How were you able to sort through the misinformation and information?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I think for me, I really needed to distill what was true, right? And so, sorry, let me actually think about formulating an answer to this question. A lot of the answers or information that you hear around Web3 are motivated by people's personal interests, right? And so I think when you're listening to information, you kind of have to think in the back of your head, like, why is this person telling me? Like, how do they benefit from it? Or, how does this fit in with like my grand scheme or picture that I have, right? So for me, it was really, really useful to think about what the web used to be. And I am lucky enough to have been alive to use some of these ancient crusty sites that I showed pictures of earlier. So like I remembered a time before social media, and I remembered a time before, we were generating all this content. And so when I was reading about those things and thinking about the research, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. And oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And I remember when blockchain really was getting like started, back in 2016. And I remember all the news articles and things like that. So this is a super long rambling answer. I'm sorry. So the best way is to like draw from your own experiences and like what you remember, and then compare that to the things that you're seeing and see what they line up, because you were there, you remember, right? And if someone's telling you some crazy crap like, oh, Facebook never existed, like you know that you know that they're not full of crap.
Yeah, awesome. There's another question, like I think it's not that related to the talk, but it's like, what is a typical day for a developer advocate like?
Ooh, that really depends on the size of your team and the skill sets that you have. So if you have a larger team, then you are more likely to be a specialist. So that means that you'll have like one or two areas that are your core competencies that you will focus on. So that could be like writing, that could be streaming, that could be making videos, it could be writing or giving talks like this. So it could be a variety of different things, especially depending on your product. If you have a very small team, kind of like I do, then you're just like a generalist, and you kind of have to just go in there and like whatever needs to be done that day, you kind of have to do it.
Awesome. There's another question about do you have any opinion about the use of NFTs, especially in the art world?
Okay, woo. So I'm gonna have to put this out here right now. My opinions are my own opinions, and they do not represent the opinions of my company. Yes. So I come from a gaming background, and the use of like what I'm gonna call collectibles or rare objects is not something that I am unfamiliar with. My opinion, at least as it stands right now, is I question the validity of NFTs as it compares to art. Is how is it any different from how we currently collect art now, right? I like to think of, if we're going to create something new, like what value are we adding, right, by making it digital, or what value are we adding to placing it on the blockchain? Right now, I have not heard personally enough evidence to fully buy into the idea. But I could be wrong. This industry changes every day. So somebody could come out with something super awesome, and I'd be like, "Ooh, that makes so much sense. I'm buying 4 NFTs right now."
Awesome. There's another question by someone who is currently in school and wants to work in Web3/blockchain. So they're
Mhm.
asking that do you have any advice for them to get started with this?
Ooh, well, first off, you are in such a fantastic position to be learning about Web3 and blockchain. Like, it's really just getting started, and that is pros and cons. So, the pros is it's the ground floor. It's a lot easier to get a job or internships or opportunities in this field because we're still creating it. The cons are it sucks because we're still creating it, and things change, and it's really difficult, and it can be hard to find people to educate you and to teach you about these things because everything is being made up as we speak. So educational materials or things like, honestly, I would recommend some tutorials by Nader Dabit, and I can post some links later on if we have a way to like share links, or like YouTube or Build Space. Like, honestly, right now, like it is literally people like myself, like developer advocates, that are really like teaching this. It's still kind of like word of mouth and Google searching at this point, but hopefully that'll change and it'll be a little bit more streamlined as the years go forward.
Great advice, Taylor. So I think it's time for,
Mhm.
yeah. So I think we can now, get this talk. I can just check if there's any other question in a
Mhm.
minute, and then we can, yeah. So there's someone asking that personally, I have been really skeptical about the value of Web3, partly because we
Mhm.
don't know what it is until after the fact, but partly because most of it right now seems to be scams. Then
Mhm.
again, that also happened with the .com bust, didn't it? So do you have any comment
So
about that?
yeah, I do. And this person is absolutely right. And something I think that is really, really interesting, and I think I kind of mentioned it earlier, is like we won't know the results of right now until in the future, right? Like we can only like make these comparisons and make these connections once everything is open. Like we are literally living history right now. And a lot of the really cool technology that came out of the .com era, such as like, was .com bust, such as social media or, video sharing, file sharing, like all those things technically came afterwards. And so my opinion, and this is might not be a popular opinion, I think the infrastructure for Web3 is being built now. We just can't see it. And it's going to take until the crash and the bubble is bursted for us to see the actual tracks that have been laid. But that's my unpopular opinion.
Okay. Thank you so much, Taylor, and thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And yeah, so it was a lovely talk. Thank you so much. We have
Thanks for
many
having
other
me.
talks scheduled, so you can go to our stage and yeah, see you there. See you on different talks. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.